My name is Denise Foster. I'm 28 years old. And before one single dinner tore the curtain down, I believed I knew exactly who my family was. We were seated around the long dining table in our sprawling Atlanta estate, the kind of place that practically breathed inherited fortune. But I wasn't there to blend into their polished world or follow their expectations. My life revolved around my startup, a tech dream I was convinced could truly change people's lives. To them, it was nothing more than a reckless fixation I should have given up years ago. In my jeans and plain sweater, I looked completely out of sync with their tailored elegance and satisfied smiles. The air felt dense, silence broken only by the soft scrape of cutlery against china. Then my mother leaned forward, her voice sharp enough to cut through bone. "Denise, we're done bailing you out," she said coolly. "We're not funding your mistakes anymore." My father gave a tight nod, his expression distant, clinical, like I was a failed stock he regretted buying. My sister's laugh followed, airy and cutting, as she reminded me I'd never reach her level. They thought they were putting me in my place, shrinking me down to size. But I remained composed, my phone vibrating softly in my pocket with a message that was about to dismantle everything they believed. They had no idea what was coming. No idea that I now held the leverage over everything they valued. If you think their smug confidence lasted, keep watching. This story is about to turn their laughter into silence. And if you want to see how I flip their insults back on them, hit subscribe and tap the bell, because what happens next will shock you. Just as the appetizers were set down, my mother's voice dropped to an icy edge. "Denise, that little tech fantasy of yours is a complete waste," she said, slicing through the delicate clink of crystal. Her stare pinned me, as if my ambition were some kind of personal betrayal. She leaned back, chandelier light catching the diamonds resting against her throat as she exhaled dramatically. "You're nearly 30. When are you going to grow up and get a real job?" Each word carried irritation and disbelief. Dad followed without hesitation, setting his wine glass down with measured calm, his face stern, like a judge delivering a verdict. "Your sister is out there closing million-dollar real estate deals," he said, gesturing toward Tracy, who sat there wearing the smug smile of someone who thought she'd already won. "That's success, Denise. Not some app that hasn't made a single cent." His words cut deeper than he realized, but I kept my expression neutral, hands folded neatly in my lap. I refused to let them see even a flicker of hurt. And of course, Tracy couldn't resist pressing further. She tossed her hair, her gold bracelet catching the light as she launched into her favorite topic, herself. "I just secured a contract for a downtown condo development," she announced proudly, her voice heavy with self-importance. "7 figures, Denise." She paused just long enough for it to land. "That's money you'll never touch chasing your childish little dreams." Her laugh rang out, sharp and deliberate, twisting something tight in my stomach. "Still living off our scraps, huh? Always asking for help." Mom nodded stiffly, lips drawn into a thin line. "We've been too soft with you," she said, folding her napkin with precise movements. "Tracy's right. You can't rely on us forever." The words struck like punches. But I didn't move. I'd heard this same performance at every holiday, every so-called family gathering. To them, I was the disappointment, the outlier who didn't match their polished high society image. Dad leaned forward, his voice firm and self-righteous. "It's time you stood on your own, Denise. No more safety net. You need to learn what it means to earn something." His tone carried the authority of a man who acted like he'd built everything himself, though every ounce of his comfort had been inherited. The house, the cars, even the wine swirling in his glass. I felt the hypocrisy, like a cold draft against my skin, but I said nothing. I let their criticism wash over me. Tracy wasn't finished. She took a slow sip of wine, amusement dancing in her eyes. "Maybe try what I did," she said smoothly. "Get your real estate license. Start at the bottom. Actually contribute to this family." Her voice dripped with condescension. "You're not cut out for this startup nonsense. Honestly, it's embarrassing." My jaw tightened. My fingers gripped the edge of the chair. I was used to their judgment, but tonight each insult seemed to press deeper. Every comment reminded me how little faith they had in me. In their eyes, I was a liability, a naive dreamer bound to fail. But I wasn't there to defend myself. And I certainly wasn't looking for their approval. The phone in my pocket felt heavier than ever, a silent symbol of something they couldn't even imagine yet. They believed their money dictated my future, that their wealth defined my limits. The dining room hummed with their smug certainty. Mom's pointed glances, Dad's patronizing tone, Tracy's gleeful cruelty. They were convinced they had already won. I let them keep talking. Each word was another layer of dirt they were shoveling onto their own downfall. When it came time for a toast, glasses meeting in arrogant harmony, my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen and paused for just a second at the name displayed. Margaret Lee, Trust Fund Manager. The message was brief. Authorize monthly distributions for Edward, Nancy, and Tracy Foster. $20,000 each. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, a wave of calm washing over me. The power dynamic had just flipped. They thought they had embarrassed me. Soon, they'd realize exactly whose approval controlled their future. Across the room, I met Shannon Reed's gaze. My best friend and my partner in the startup understood exactly what tonight meant. She had been there for every sleepless night of coding, every high-stakes investor pitch, every setback that nearly crushed us. I gave her a subtle nod. Without a word, she excused herself and joined me near the bar. They have no idea what's about to happen, she murmured quietly, her voice buzzing with anticipation. They don't realize you're the one calling the shots. I leaned closer, keeping my voice steady. They've been living off decisions I made years ago, I said, watching my parents and Tracy laugh among their glittering friends. It's time they finally understand that. At that moment, the dining room doors swung open. Margaret Lee stepped inside, her heels striking the marble floor in sharp, deliberate rhythm. A slim leather folder rested in her hands, her expression composed but purposeful, like someone delivering a verdict. The chatter in the room softened. Guests looked around, sensing something shift. Mom's smile faltered. A flicker of unease crossed her face. Dad carefully set down his glass, posture tightening. Tracy stopped mid-sentence, eyes narrowing toward the entrance. Miss Foster, Margaret said, her clear, steady voice cutting cleanly through the room. I require your authorization for the trust fund disbursements. She opened the folder, revealing neatly organized documents stamped with the official seal of the family trust. Every gaze turned toward me, confusion spreading like a ripple. Dad let out a sharp, dismissive laugh. This is absurd, he scoffed. Denise? Managing the trust? She's chasing some failing app. Mom's voice rose, thin and strained. There's been some misunderstanding, Margaret. Our daughter doesn't control our finances. She can barely manage her own. Tracy crossed her arms, smirking. Is this a joke? Denise in charge of our money? Please. Margaret didn't react. Calmly, she slid a document across the table and tapped a highlighted section. Miss Denise Foster has been the sole trustee of the $20 million Foster Family Trust since she turned 25, she stated evenly. She oversees all assets, including the estate, the vehicles, and the monthly payments of $20,000 each. No money is distributed without her authorization. The room went completely silent. The color drained from Dad's face, his authority evaporating in a heartbeat. Mom's hand shot to the diamonds at her throat as if she needed something to hold her upright. Tracy's smug smile vanished, her wine glass shaking in her grip. Margaret shut the folder, gave me a short, respectful nod, and turned toward the door. I'll wait for your instruction, Miss Foster, she said before her heels echoed across the marble and disappeared, leaving nothing but stunned quiet behind her. I stood slowly, my voice steady and sharp as it sliced through the thick air. For the last 3 years, every dollar you've spent has gone through me, I said calmly, meeting each of their frozen expressions. The cars, the vacations, Tracy's condo projects, every bit of it required my signature. You believed you were in control. The truth is, I always was. Their carefully constructed world was starting to fracture. And I was just getting started. Dessert plates touched down softly as my phone buzzed again. I pulled it out, ignoring the strained small talk attempting to patch the silence. A new message flashed from Paul Carter, the bank manager overseeing the trust. Confirm. Suspend all foster family allowances. My heartbeat stayed even as I stared at the screen. After years of being their scapegoat, it was time they understood the cost of their contempt. I stepped a few paces away from the table and lifted the phone to my ear, my voice quiet but firm. Place a hold on everything, I said. No disbursements for Edward, Nancy, or Tracy Foster. Effective immediately. Paul's response was crisp. Understood, Miss Foster. It's done. I ended the call, slipped the phone back into my pocket, and returned to my seat, my expression calm. Tracy noticed first. Her brows furrowed as she stared at her phone, manicured fingers tapping faster and faster. What is this? She muttered, her voice rising. My card was declined. She tried again, her face flushing as the same notification appeared. That's impossible. I used it this morning. Her eyes lifted to mine, suspicion beginning to form. I simply raised my glass and took a slow sip of water. Dad's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Tracy, what's happening? He demanded. She shoved her phone toward him, her voice unsteady. My accounts are frozen. And the downtown condo deal, it's falling apart. They're saying the funds never went through. Messages from furious partners flooded her screen. Panic crept into every syllable. Mom pressed a hand to her chest, bracelets clinking as her composure wavered. There has to be an error, she said quickly, though fear flickered in her eyes. Our finances are secure. They always have been. She turned to Dad, gripping his arm tightly. Edward, the house, the taxes, the mortgage. Those are fine, right? The question hung in the charged air. I leaned back, my voice level and precise. The mansion is owned by the trust, I said, holding each of their gazes. And I control the trust. Without my approval, there's no money for taxes.
No payments.
Nothing. Dad's face lost the last of its color. The confident patriarch mask slipped, revealing something fragile underneath. That's ridiculous, he muttered, but the doubt in his voice betrayed him. We don't need your permission to live our lives. You're bluffing, Tracy burst out, panic sharpening her words. You can't just cut us off. We have our own money, our own deals. But her hands trembled as she clutched her phone like it was the only thing keeping her afloat. Mom stepped in, her voice cracking. Denise, please. Let's be reasonable. We've always been there for you. This must be some misunderstanding. The words sounded empty, thin attempts to cover years of dismissal and ridicule. I shook my head slightly, my expression unreadable. For 3 years, I said evenly. I've signed every check that kept your cars running, your vacations booked, your lifestyle intact. You thought you were in charge? You never were. The truth landed hard. No one rushed to argue. Tracy's phone buzzed again. She glanced down and gasped. Her biggest client had just canceled their contract. The confidence drained from her face as the polished image she clung to began to collapse. Dad straightened, grasping for what little pride he had left. We don't need your charity, he snapped. But his clenched fists told a different story. We've managed just fine without you. I lifted an eyebrow, letting silence stretch between us. They could deny it all they wanted, but the reality was already settling over them. Their wealth, their comfort, their sense of power. It all existed because of me. Mom's eyes filled with tears as her composure finally broke. Denise, you can't do this, she whispered. I didn't hesitate. Their panic filled the room, heavy and raw. I felt only the quiet satisfaction of balance restored. They had mocked me, diminished me, treated me like a failure. Now, they were discovering the price of that arrogance. The dining room fell silent again, broken only by the soft chime of my phone. I glanced down and my chest tightened at the name on the screen. A venture capitalist I had pitched to the year before. The subject line hit like ice. Concerns regarding your startup's credibility. My jaw set as I read further.
Tracy had sabotaged me.
She'd told investors my company was a scam, a desperate cash grab. Her lies had derailed a critical funding round and nearly destroyed everything I had built before it even launched. I lifted my gaze slowly, until it locked with hers. You told investors my startup was a fraud, I said, my voice low and razor-sharp. Her face drained of color, lips parting in silent protest. I raised my phone, the email glowing in my hand. This came from one of them. I continued. They heard it directly from you. The room went deathly still. Conversation stopped. Every pair of eyes turned to Tracy as she struggled to speak, her hands shaking. That's not true, she snapped, but her voice trembled, exposing the lies she was trying to hide. Mom looked between us, guilt and defiance battling across her face. Denise, she was protecting our family's reputation, she said, her tone unsteady, but still attempting authority. Your startup, it's risky. She was thinking about what was best for all of us. Dad gave a stiff nod, jaw tight. She didn't intend to hurt you, he added quietly. Tracy was trying to keep our name out of gossip. You know how quickly rumors spread in our circles. Their defense struck deeper than I expected. They weren't just excusing her. They were standing behind her. They knew she had undermined my dream, damaged my credibility, and they chose her anyway. Tracy clung to their support, desperation spilling over. I had to do it, Denise, she cried, eyes wild. Your app was a ticking time bomb. It would have dragged us down with you. I was saving this family. Her voice shook, excuses unraveling as fast as her empire. The air felt heavy, betrayal pressing down like a storm cloud. I placed my phone carefully on the table, my stare cold and unblinking. You all knew, I said quietly. You knew, I said, the steel in my voice cutting clean through the silence. You knew she lied to investors. You knew she tried to tear down everything I built, and you still stood behind her. Mom's fingers tightened around her necklace, tears pooling in her eyes. She didn't answer. Dad turned his face away, his silence louder than any excuse. Tracy's shoulders slumped, the last trace of defiance draining out of her. You thought you could crush me, I continued, straightening, calm but immovable. But for 3 years, every luxury you enjoyed, your cars, your vacations, your business deals, came from the trust one managed. From me. And now I'm finished. The word hung in the air like a verdict. No more allowances. No more trust distributions. Not a single cent. Mom gasped, both hands covering her mouth. Dad's expression collapsed, the confident patriarch replaced by a man exposed and uncertain. Tracy's phone slipped from her hand, hitting the table with a dull knock. The world they'd built on pride and deception was finally splitting apart, and all I felt was clarity. They had chosen appearances over honesty, betrayal over loyalty. Now, they would face what followed. Their loyalty had never been to family, only to maintaining perfection. As the last of the guests quietly slipped out, I stood. The room felt heavy and still. Mom, Dad, and Tracy sat frozen, their authority gone. I had listened to their justifications for years. I wasn't listening anymore. I squared my shoulders, my voice steady and final, the voice of someone who no longer needed their approval, their wealth, or their world. The $20 million trust is under my control, I said, holding each of their gazes. And starting today, every dollar goes into my company. The same company you ridiculed. The one you said would never succeed. That's where it belongs. None of it goes to you.
Not now.
Not ever. My words shattered the quiet. Mom's breath caught, her hand flying to her chest, but I didn't soften. This wasn't spite.
It was consequence.
Dad spoke, his voice rough, strained. Denise the house, he said, desperation creeping in. If the funds stop, we can't cover the property taxes. They'll take it. The admission cracked what little composure he had left. The Grand Atlanta estate, their proudest symbol, was nothing but a weight they couldn't carry alone. I met his pleading eyes, my tone steady. That stopped being my responsibility the moment you chose to dismiss me. Tracy lifted her head, panic blazing. You're ruining me, she choked. My clients are gone. My deals are falling apart. I'm nothing without my reputation. Her hands trembled around her phone as if it could somehow fix the collapse unfolding in real time. The woman who had built everything on image and influence was watching it crumble piece by piece. I felt no sympathy. She had tried to destroy my future. Now she was living in the wreckage of her own decisions. Mom's voice shook. Denise, we're your family, she whispered. You can't just abandon us. But the words carried no weight. They had turned away from me long ago, replacing support with criticism, loyalty with betrayal. I shook my head slowly. Family doesn't sabotage each other's dreams, I said. Family doesn't lie to investors and try to destroy what someone worked for. You did that. Not me. I stepped toward the door, each movement lighter than the last. I don't need you to succeed, I said, my voice echoing softly through the silent room. Every line of code, every pitch, every sleepless night. I built this. The trust is just a resource now, and I'll use it to prove you were wrong. My startup had never been just an idea. It was proof of who I had become. I didn't need their money, their approval, or their last name anymore. No one spoke. The guests were gone. Dad stared down at the table as if searching for a way to reverse the irreversible. Mom's shoulders sagged in defeat. Tracy hovered over her phone, but no call was coming to save her. They had underestimated me, thought they could control me,
Contain me.
Now the truth stood in front of them. Their entire world had depended on me. I paused at the doorway, hand resting against the frame. You thought you could break me, I said quietly. But I was the one holding you up. And I'm done. The silence that followed was suffocating, nothing like the smug laughter that had filled the house hours earlier. They had lost everything, their wealth, their status, their illusion of control, because when it mattered, they chose betrayal over belief. I walked out without looking back. Their collapse was swift. Tax notices stacked up.
Client withdrew.
The glamorous life they had curated unraveled piece by piece. And I was free. Free to build something bigger than their narrow expectations, driven by my resilience and the trust now in my hands. 6 months later, I stood in my new office overlooking the same Atlanta skyline. The space buzzed with energy, screens glowing, ideas flowing, a team united by purpose. My company's logo stood proudly on the wall, a symbol of everything I had fought for. What they once mocked as childish had become one of Atlanta's most promising tech ventures, praised locally as an industry disruptor. The $20 million trust, once funding indulgence, had become the backbone of innovation, reshaped by my effort, my risk, my vision. I felt pride, not just in the success, but in the quiet justice of proving them wrong. Meanwhile, my parents' empire shrank to nothing. Without the trust's support, they lost the mansion over unpaid taxes and were forced to sell at a loss. Marble floors and sweeping views were replaced by a modest apartment far from downtown. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they now lived carefully, budgeting every expense, relying on Dad's dwindling investments and Mom's occasional consulting work. Gala nights and luxury shopping had given way to discount stores and strict grocery lists. Tracy's fall was harsher still. Her once pristine reputation was ruined.
Client disappeared.
Accounts were locked. Her high-profile career dissolved. She ended up in a small office, pushing paperwork for a fraction of her former income. Designer bags and glossy features vanished, replaced by whispers behind her back. She called once, left a voicemail. I never returned it. The damage she'd done to my company still cut too deeply. Through everything, Shannon Reed never faltered. My closest friend, my partner in this journey. She stood beside me through every late night, every rejection, every small win. As we reviewed the newest growth charts, she smiled, pride shining in her eyes. We did this, Denise, she said warmly. Not them. Not the trust. Us. I smiled back, grateful not just for the success, but for the people who truly believed. Our startup wasn't surviving anymore. It was thriving. Investors were lining up. Downloads were climbing by the thousands. The excitement around our app grew louder by the day. Shannon's belief had been the steady ground beneath me when my own family tried to shake everything apart. Standing by the window, watching the city pulse with life, I realized something I had learned the hard way, something worth sharing. Never mistake silence for weakness. The person you underestimate might be the one holding your future in their hands. My family tried to control me, dismiss my vision, even sabotage my work. They were wrong about me from the start. Real success doesn't come from inheritance or approval. It comes from believing in yourself when no one else does. I built something real, not from their wealth or their praise, but from persistence, courage, and refusal to give up. What happened to them wasn't revenge. It was consequence. Their pride, Tracy's deceit. Those choices built their downfall. They called me naive, said my dream was foolish, but their doubt became my fuel. The trust they once relied on became the engine behind the future I created. I don't need their recognition to know I've won. And to everyone who's been following this journey, thank you. Your support means more than you know. I hope this story reminds you of your own strength. Never let anyone convince you that you're small. Everything you need to build something extraordinary is already inside you. Share in the comments a moment when you proved someone wrong, or a dream you're fighting for right now. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Here's to building our futures on our own terms, no matter who doubts us.